Hey Jags, I hope everyone is staying healthy and managing to stay busy during this time stuck in quarantine. I am Sara Patterson. I'm the general manager at Jag TV. Y'all normally don't see very much of me because I'm normally on the other side of the camera actually recording the videos. So it's not very often that I'm sitting on this side of the camera actually being in the videos. So please bear with me as I get more used to actually being on camera because I don't normally do this. But I wanted to continue making content for Jag TV and still having things to post. And since I don't have any students to record like I normally do, the only option is for me to be on camera. So I have all kinds of ideas and things planned that I want to do to continue to have content on Jag TV. So I will be doing it from this side of the camera in more of a vlog style. But I'm really excited for all of the content that I have planned for Jag TV in our new quarantine series. I think that's what I'm gonna call it. I know, very original. But for this first episode, I am so excited for y'all to watch it. It is an interview with the editor-in-chief of Due South magazine. Her name is Sara Boone. She has been the editor for the past 3 years, and she has done just an amazing job making Due South into what it is now. I sat down with her via FaceTime, and we just talked about how she got the job, what it is like making the magazine, the whole process from beginning to end. We talked about how this quarantine is affecting her, trying to make this issue of the magazine, and like what happened last semester, the fall semester. We talked about that. We talked about all kinds of things related to Due South. I hope y'all enjoy the interview and you like everything that Sara has to say. So let's just get into it. All right, so thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate this. Can you introduce yourself for everyone who's watching?
Yeah, my name is Sara Boone. I am a senior in strategic communications and I am editor-in-chief of Due South magazine.
Talk more about your role in Due South and what you do.
So, as editor-in-chief of Due South, it's kind of my responsibility to lead the magazine. Jag Media in general is pretty hands-off in terms of like our director of student media, Heather Lee Stanley. She kind of lets us do what we need to do because she hires leaders who she trusts and who she knows are capable of running each branch of Jag Media. But I think a lot of people probably don't know what all goes into being editor of a magazine. It's not just telling people what stories to write and then editing their stories. It's a whole lot of behind the scenes things. I mean, I have to plan promotions, I have to photograph, I have to write, I have to edit. But I think probably the biggest part of it is doing the layout of the magazine. I do that through Adobe InDesign. I have to make graphics. Sometimes I have to go back and edit pictures or show people how to edit pictures in a different way. So it's a lot more than just telling people what to do and editing their stories.
So then, starting in the very, very beginning of your whole process as editor-in-chief, how did you get the job in the first place?
I was in my freshman year at South, and in high school I was a part of my yearbook staff and I really enjoyed it. I started doing yearbook solely because I love photography, and then through that I learned that I also really loved graphic design and typography and layout, and so I came to South and I realized that there's not a yearbook because most colleges don't have yearbooks, and so I saw an ad for becoming assistant editor of Due South, and I was like, oh, a magazine, that's kind of similar to a yearbook. It's like the next best thing in my mind. So I actually applied to be assistant editor, which was, I think, very ambitious considering I hadn't really heard of the magazine before, even though it had been around since 2012, and I hadn't been involved with it at all before, but I knew that looking at it, there were a lot of things that I personally wanted to change about it and that I thought would be positive changes for it, and so I applied to be assistant editor, and then the director of student media at the time, or whatever the position title was at the time, he pulled me out of class one day because I had him as a professor, and he asked me if I would be editor-in-chief, and I was like, I don't really know about all that. I don't know anything about this magazine. Like, I've never worked for it. I don't know any of the staff members. Like, I know nothing about it. And he was like, don't worry, like the editor of the newspaper can help train you. She can teach you all the ins and outs and everything as long as you're comfortable doing it. And I was like, okay, let's just give it a shot. We'll see. And it turned out to be literally, I think, the best decision I've made in college, because I've learned so much about what I'm good at, but also what I'm bad at. And I've learned kind of what I want to do with my career. So it's been a really good experience.
So did you already know most of the applications from when you were in yearbook, or did you have to learn everything when you started?
No, the only one that I knew from yearbook, I vaguely knew Photoshop, just because I had done a little bit of photo editing before. I wouldn't even say that I was that good at it. I was just a little familiar with it. But with yearbook, there was an online software that we used to do the layout, so we actually didn't even use any Adobe programs for it. So I ended up working as, I don't know, some position with the newspaper this summer after my freshman year, so that I could get training in doing layout and writing and stuff in preparation for going into being editor-in-chief. So that was kind of my first experience with doing InDesign. That was a huge learning curve, but I think I just kind of watched a lot of YouTube videos and just kind of learned that on my own, and then asked people for help along the way. And then with Adobe Illustrator, I actually just kind of recently, within the last year and a half, started using that program. I was putting off trying to learn it for a long time because I knew it would be a little difficult, and it is, but now that I know all the tools, it's something that I'm very comfortable with. And that's another thing that I kind of learned on my own. I took a couple classes that kind of touched on it, but a lot of it I've just kind of Googled whenever I need to know how to do something, and then learn how to do that one thing, and then learn how to do one other thing. So it's been a lot of little steps.
So how did you feel going into that? Were you excited, or were you just absolutely terrified?
I was excited because I think I was missing being a part of something and being able to be creative. Because at the time I wasn't involved in any clubs. I was a part of the Honors College, which was really fun. But it wasn't really something that I could be as creative with, and so I was really missing that outlet. So in terms of that, I was very excited, but I was definitely terrified because I don't know what happened, but coming in, there were no existing staff members. I had to hire a whole new staff. We also got Miss Stanley as director of student media at the time, so she, like a whole new boss was coming in, and JAG Media as a whole was restructuring. So I think it was kind of a good time for me to come in, because I could kind of weave my rebranding idea for Due South into that. But it was also really scary just trying to learn, like even learning people's names. Like I had to learn every single person who was involved with JAG Media, who did the payroll and everything. So it was scary but exciting, definitely.
Well, that leads into my next question. I was going to ask, how were you able to really build your style? Because Due South has such a specific style, and everyone knows what Due South looks like. So how are you able to build that style?
So part of it, I think, comes from my yearbook background and just getting into learning layout and design very early. And that's something that I have always been interested in. And so I definitely credit that. But I actually came into my interview for assistant editor with a printout of how I would change the layout. They didn't ask for it at all, but I said, this is, I think, what needs to change. This is, I think, what it needs to look like to make it look better, essentially. So I came in with a very strong idea, and we rebranded Due South to have a more consistent, modern, professional look. And even now, like, this is my 6th issue, I guess, that I've worked on. And every single issue, I think, gets a little bit closer to what my mind, like what Due South should be in my mind. So like I started out just kind of doing basic layouts that I thought looked very good, looked very clean, because that's what I was comfortable with at the time. I didn't want to overwhelm myself. I didn't know a whole lot about graphic design at the time, like making illustrations, so I didn't want to try to pile that on at the time. And then once I got comfortable with that, I started getting really creative with photo shoots and really planning out the layouts around the photos themselves. And then I started doing kind of different things with the layouts, making them, you know, including more graphics in them, doing some different fonts, just kind of making them more fun. And so I've just been kind of slowly developing, I guess, my style and kind of getting more comfortable with doing things with Due South, because I know that we have a very strong style, but we also have, I think, a really good base of people who actually enjoy looking at Due South and maybe even reading it too. But I know that even like all across the country, there's schools who we interact with at conferences, and they say how much they genuinely love looking at Due South. So I try to keep that in my mind when I'm doing layouts, and try to think that it's not just something that I like, but I have to think of something that people in general would like too.
So then what was the process of building up a staff from absolutely nobody and then creating that first issue?
It was a little difficult. I sat in on interviews that the editor-in-chief of the Vanguard was doing so that I could learn how to hire someone, because I had never hired anyone before. Even though my staff are freelancers, I still consider them a staff of hires, because they're all very important. And so I think at first I got very lucky, and I ended up hiring a very good staff of people, and like some people have like stayed with me since the very beginning. But I think at the beginning I wasn't as particular about who I was hiring. I think I was just grateful that people were wanting to be on my staff in general. And so I was just picking like the best photographer out of who applied, or the best writer out of who applied, and not setting a standard, I think, for who I was hiring. And luckily I ended up hiring people who were incredible. I could have done really bad and just hired people who ended up being terrible, but it worked out. And so I think since then I've learned that I don't have to hire someone just because they're the best out of who applied, even if they don't meet my criteria for Due South. And so I think I've been able to build up that standard for my staff members, and that definitely helps keep Due South having a very consistent and professional look, because we have people who contribute to it who are very good, and it's definitely not just me. It's like the photographers, the writers, everybody I think is held to a very high standard, and I think everybody always exceeds that.
So talk about the process from the very first meeting of the semester all the way to the launch party. What do you do?
So, it's a little bit different each semester. So like with the fall semester issue, we usually release that around Thanksgiving-ish time. So we kind of start thinking about it in the summer before. I'll start, just in the back of my mind, thinking about what kind of stories I want to be in there, maybe some concepts for photo shoots, and that's when I'll start thinking about hiring new staff members if I need to. And then once the semester starts, within the first couple weeks of the semester, that's when I try to hire all my new people, so that I could have a staff ready to go. And then we start having our meetings every other week, and that's where I tell the staff members my ideas for stories, and then I also ask them if there's anything they want to write about. So it's definitely not all me saying, this is what's going to be in Due South and I need y'all to write about this. It's a lot of basically me asking for help. Like, I need to know what y'all want to write about. I need to know what y'all want to be in Due South. And so from there, we, like I said, meet every other week. And then as the semester goes on and people are progressing on their stories, that's when we start to kind of plan out photo shoots. And I would say I'm more of a photographer than a writer, so I definitely have stronger opinions on the photo shoots than I do on the stories. So I sometimes will have a very, very specific idea for a photo shoot that I ask the photographers to try to work with if they're comfortable and willing to. But sometimes I'm like, I have absolutely no idea what we should do for this photo shoot. Does anybody have any ideas? And so I try to keep that constant communication between all the staff members, because we have an entire semester to put together this issue, and so it seems it may not seem super beneficial to meet every other week, but I feel like keeping that constant communication will help keep it in the back of people's minds that they need to be thinking about their stories and thinking about their photo shoots. And especially semesters like this one, it's good to get things done early because you don't know if a global pandemic will happen and you have to change your whole plan. But every semester, other than this one, we will, once everything's done, I have a final deadline for my staff members, and then they'll send everything to me, and that's when me and my assistant editor will start doing layout. And then once everything is done, it's all checked over and everything, then we send it to our printer, they print it, and we usually have a launch party at the student center where the crowd comes and plays music. We distribute the copies, they're free so people can just have them. We normally have snacks, and it's just kind of a fun time to get the magazine into people's hands and I guess kind of show off what we've been working for an entire semester. So that's probably the most fun part of it, just finally getting it out, seeing it printed, and having it in people's hands.
So Due South made some national news in this past issue, had a lot of headlines on a lot of national news stations, and it was talked about a lot. So kind of just explain what happened.
So last semester, it was the first semester that we did a special topics issue. Normally, all of our stories in Due South just pertain to students, campus, or community. But with this one, I wanted to have kind of an overarching theme of diversity and inclusion. And so in that issue, we had stories on religious diversity, students with disabilities, gaming culture, LGBTQ life, drag queens, diversity in the workplace, like you name it, we talked about it. And so everything was great. We sent the issue to our printer, and I got an email saying that they would not be printing our issue because it doesn't adhere to their Christian values. And that was all the information we got out of it, never anything specific. We don't know exactly what offended them in the magazine. But then we kind of had to start, problem solving. We found a new printer, and then after we found a new printer and everything was kind of solved, the Vanguard put out a story about it because it's been kind of in the news a lot lately that businesses are denying some type of service to people based off of their beliefs or their lifestyle or whatever. So the Vanguard put out a story on it, and then local news picked it up, and then national news picked it up. And it kind of just became this whole big thing. And I think there was probably a lot of misunderstanding around it. A lot of people were saying, well, why should they print your magazine? Why are you trying to force them to? And I wanted to reply to every single person who posted a comment and say, we're not trying to get them to print our magazine. Like, I said, okay, like I sent them an email back and said, I'm sorry to hear that. I really wish you would have told us beforehand what content you were willing and not willing to print. but okay. So we found a new printer and it was over, but people kind of thought, I guess, that we were the bad guy and we were trying to force their hand and pay them money to print our magazine. So it kind of became a whole thing. It was definitely, I think, a weird experience for me, definitely a good one, because not a lot of people can say that they deal with a major PR crisis when they're in college. So it was something that I definitely learned a lot from. I never thought that I would use any information that I learned in my PR classes, because I'm not going into PR. But I definitely did. So I don't know, it was a whole experience. But I think coming out on the other end of it, once we finally got it printed, we had our launch party and everything kind of cooled off, and we got a lot of positive reactions from people. A lot of people were saying, I'm so proud of y'all for going through with what you believe in. You're just telling people's stories and there's nothing wrong with that. And there's even people who were saying, like, you're literally saving lives by telling people's stories and not pretending that they don't exist. Like, you're actually saving people's lives. And so it was definitely a very rewarding experience, I would say.
So I know following all of that, you received a lot of hate. You even got some hate mail sent to you. So do you have any tips for dealing with that?
I think my biggest tip for dealing with any type of criticism, but especially online criticism, is probably just what every celebrity says, and just don't read the comments. I think it might have been like AL.com or something that was one of the first websites to actually post a story about us, and I remember like refreshing the page, reading all the comments, and then eventually I was just like, why am I even reading these? Every single comment is ignorant. Like, people don't understand the situation because there's not enough information out right now, because we didn't at the time have the magazine published, so people were just looking at the cover image and not getting the content of getting the context of the stories. And so they were just like, oh, well, you just have a drag queen and a Muslim woman on the cover. Like, why are you even doing that? It doesn't make any sense. You're just trying to make headlines. And so people were even questioning that the drag queen was a drag queen. Like, people will question every single thing. People will always find something to criticize. So I think my biggest thing is just don't read the comments. And if you do read the comments, as tempting as it is, don't reply to them. I wanted to reply to every single one of them just to correct them and say, no, it's actually this. But it won't help anything. So I think just don't interact. It's really difficult, but don't interact with them. And then in terms of just dealing with all of it, if people are mad, then you're doing something. Like, if I had just kind of rolled over and said, oh man, we're not going to publish this magazine now, then like, that's not doing anything. Like, if people are mad about our content, and if our content is not harmful in any way, and they're just mad because it's different, maybe from what they're used to, then like, we're doing exactly what we set out to do. We're spreading these stories, and we're, giving people the option to read these stories whether they want to or not. Is totally up to them. I don't really care. I did my job and published the magazine. And so that's, all I can really do.
What were some of the craziest comments that you saw?
I think one that was so crazy was the one where somebody was like, that's not even a drag queen on the cover, and somebody said, yes it is, and they said, prove it. And I was like, I can't prove it. Like, it is. I don't know what to say. Somebody said, that looks like such a motley crew, but the overalls are cute though, talking about my sister who was on the cover and she was wearing like some khaki overalls, and I was like, what a random comment. Some people, I got the actual hate mail, like in the mail, addressed to me, and the guy, I haven't read it in so long, but he was talking about how, I don't know, he was comparing us to like modern day slavery. He, I don't know, was very, very derogatory in terms of like talking about gay people. He said that trans people should be called it because they are not people anymore to him. It was a whole lot of really hurtful things that people were saying, and so even if it wasn't directed at me, it really hurt me because this is actual human beings that they're talking about. And some people who, you know, I photographed them, I interacted with them, so I know them. So that was really hurtful. I was at a wedding and a family member, we were talking about the magazine, and I mean, I had to argue with him for 30 minutes because he kept talking about like how I just wanted to kind of make headlines and I wanted to stir things up by putting different types of people on the cover of the magazine. He kept talking, he was very, you know, racist, he was very homophobic. It was just like a whole thing where eventually I had to be like, you're never gonna change your mind. I can't do anything for you, I'm sorry. All I can do is publish a magazine with people's stories and hope that you read it, but I cannot do anything else for you.
This time around with this issue, how is the quarantine impacting the whole process of making the magazine?
So luckily we had a lot of progress before we had to start isolating ourselves. And then I normally work from home anyways. We have a JAG Media office on campus, but I almost never work in there just because I like working from home. When I think of something that I want to do on a layout, I like being able to just do it whenever I want. So I'm used to working from home, so that's not difficult for me. I think it's just, you know, photo shoots have been difficult. We've had to do Zoom meetings, which everybody's doing, so that hasn't been too bad. But I've been, also since I'm graduating this semester, I've been trying to train someone to take over as editor-in-chief whenever I leave. And so I was, you know, planning on really sitting down with her several times to show her how I do layout, how I do graphic design, photo editing, and all that stuff. So now that's just a little bit more difficult. I've like screen recorded and sent her how I do things, and we've just been in constant communication, so it's a little bit difficult, but I mean, the staff as a whole, we're making it work. It's gonna publish. It's just a little bit more challenging than it needed to be.
So when is it publishing and what's your plan?
So we're going to publish on our original publication date of April 22nd. And obviously we can't have a launch party like we were planning to, but we're trying to figure out right now, we're still going to print out like the physical printed copies. We have a new printer and everything, but we're trying to figure out where we can actually distribute them, because I think I just saw an email that summer classes are not even going to be on campus, so people won't be on campus for a while, so I don't know if we'll distribute them on campus. We do have a lot of off-campus distribution locations, and I don't know if we'll be able to put them there because non-essential businesses are closed. But if anything, we always have our digital version at jagmedia.org, and so that'll be up for people to at least be able to read it before they can get a physical copy. So we do have a plan. It's, you know, constantly evolving, but we're trying to do the best we can.
I know most of the apartment complexes in the area, their offices are still open, so you at least have that.
Yeah. I think definitely, like you said, we need to reach out and see if we can distribute copies to apartments so that students can see them and, you know, at least somebody can get their hands on them.
What emotions are you going through having to pass the magazine on to somebody else?
I thought I would be a lot more scared about it, not because I don't trust who I'm passing the magazine on to, but because whenever I came in, I rebranded the magazine, like I said, so it's been kind of my vision, I guess, for the past 3 years, and I've been doing all the layout, all the graphic design, and so nobody else has really had their hands on it as much as I have. And so I think the only thing to be worried about is just maintaining that consistent look. But I've been training my assistant editor to be able to do that look. I've been showing her exactly how I do layout, and I fully trust that she has the eye to be able to keep that vision. But it's time, I think, to pass it on. I'm the longest running editor of this magazine that we've ever had. I think most college magazines only have an editor for like a different one for each issue. So I've definitely been lucky that I've got to do it for so long and develop it into something that I really, really love and am proud of. But I am happy to be passing it on. It's definitely time for me to kind of move on in the professional world and do something else. But it's been really fun, and so I'm glad I got to do it for so long, but I am also glad that it's almost done. The pressure is almost off of me.
So what's your personal plan moving on from here?
So things are kind of up in the air right now. I've been applying to jobs all over the country, actually, just trying to get something that I think I would enjoy. And I unfortunately don't think that anyone is hiring right now because I think probably my field is considered non-essential, like graphic design, photography, branding. I don't think that's essential right now. So I don't think anyone is hiring, so that kind of throws a wrench in my life plan. But I'm trying not to worry about it too much. I'm trying to just kind of take it one step at a time. And then I guess I'm just gonna have to find something in Mobile for the time being and just see what happens.
If you could go anywhere and do anything, what would you want to do?
My absolute dream job that I just recently figured out was a real thing is there are graphic designers who produce things for movies, but it's not even the movie poster. Like, that would be a cool thing to do, but like if you watch a movie and they go into a restaurant, like the restaurant has a sign, the restaurant has a menu. If they go into a store, there's like all the advertisements. Like, I don't know why I'm so interested in designing these.
I never thought about that.
Exactly. It's so cool because you watch some movies and some of them are like, oh, that's an ad, but some of them are like really cool. Like if you got to work with Harry Potter, like whenever they were filming that and make like all the parchment and everything, like that would just be the coolest thing ever. And nobody even knows that there's a person that does that, but I think that would be like ultimate career goal for me.
Good luck in all of your future endeavors. I know this is really not a good time to be looking for a job, so I'm so sorry about that.
It sucks. We'll get through it though. Well, there's worse things that can happen, I guess.
But thank you so much. I really appreciate this.